Namaste, everybody. Chris Quinones here, and I am so happy you joined me. Excuse me, just one moment while I correct some feedback I'm getting here. Good evening, welcome. Chris Quinones here, and I am so happy you're joining me this week for my 5-day Beat the Heat Anti-Inflammation Bootcamp. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Quinones, the founder of Rasayana, an Ayurvedic massage therapy practice located just outside of Boston in Winchester, Massachusetts. I am a Kripalu-trained Ayurvedic health counselor, bodywork specialist, and yoga therapist as well. And for the last 20 some odd years, I've worked in rehabilitative massage, therapeutic yoga, natural self-healing, and competitive sports. And I have combined all of my experience into my practice at Rasayana, where I am really passionate about leading small groups of women through a year-long transformation, teaching the self-healing habits of yogis and extending their quality of life, improving the quality of life, getting rid of the chronic exhaustion, inflammation, fatigue, brain fog that bothers so many of us. And I want to talk a little bit today first about how I got into Ayurveda. I had already been studying and practicing yoga for about 5 years. I come from the Ashtanga yoga lineage and had gotten into that from a sport injury. I was a former competitive martial artist, and I'm very active. I have always grown up playing a lot of sports, playing tennis, and I used to be a competitive gymnast, and now I dance ballroom competitively. So I use my body a lot, and I've injured my body a lot over those years. And thankfully, I found yoga and this system of self-healing, Ayurveda, shortly thereafter. And I had begun my rehabilitative work through yoga for some torn cartilage in my hip that I experienced from my martial art competitions. And in the process of healing from that, it was discovered that I have congenital hip dysplasia, which I never knew. Who knew? I was just so active and physically involved in my body, taking good care as an athlete growing up, that it didn't bother me. But when I had this injury and then the surgery after that, doctors gave me a pretty grim prognosis that I was really going to be at a much higher risk and rate of osteoporosis and needing to likely have hip replacements by the time I was 30. This is pretty devastating to hear. And, you know, I was 22 at the time, maybe. And it was through yoga to strengthen my muscles and get back the stability in my hip joint after I had the surgery, along with lots of PT. I was able to self-heal, and later finding this self-healing system of Ayurveda was able to take care of my body's tissues in a much more meaningful and deep way. And that's what I'm hoping this week will do for you, is renew your relationship to your body and your awareness around what your tissues need, and how Ayurveda looks at healing our bodies and what that means in terms of the kind of chronic diseases and conditions that are plaguing us in the modern world. You know, autoimmune disease is something that is becoming, or is already, an epidemic, a pandemic, if you will, that we have such chronic adrenal fatigue and exhaustion and toxicity from our environment and our lifestyles, that our bodies and our minds are deteriorating at a much more rapid rate. And when you use the habits of the yogis, as I work with my clients, you're able to slow down that natural degenerative process of aging and be able to give the tissues the nourishment that they need for peak performance, for longevity, and for luster, and ease in your life. And so I'm hoping that by giving you a little bit of a taste this week on what the system of Ayurveda is and how it applies to a specific area of your health or home this week with regard to chronic inflammation, which is the silent disease. And Ayurveda looks to our lifestyles and our natural makeup of these elements found in nature. Now, Ayurveda is the system of self-healing. It's known as the art of living to some, and it is a roughly 5,000-year-old practice that comes from the country of India and is this natural healing system. And through studying the different elements like space, earth, air, fire, water, and how they interact in the universe around us and nature's laws, are how they also operate within us in our own physiology. So I'm going to break down a little bit of some of that theory for you today. And if you want more about more info about that, you can go to my website at www.rasa-yana.com and click on the More button at the top, and you'll go to a resource page where I have a lot of other free videos for you. It gives you a little bit more of a background to this system and how we look at these elements, their combinations and forces, and how they impact our lives on every level, from the physical body to the mental and emotional body, to your intuitive body, and to your soul. And how do we use this knowledge to understand ourselves, our truest nature, and how to recognize when we go out of balance, which is the start of the disease process. So, like I said, I came to Ayurveda through an injury and yoga. And as I implemented these habits, I was able to manage my pain and inflammation, which in my case was from an injury. But for a lot of my clients, it goes beyond that into an inflammation that is systemic, a result of our thoughts, our toxins, or trauma. The 3 T's really are at the root of a lot of the chronic inflammation that I see on the health history forms coming into my office. And so in order to really mitigate a chronic issue, we have to talk about changing our mindset, changing our habits, and changing and evolving really our lifestyles, our relationships to ourselves and to others. So I'm going to share my screen here for a moment and talk a little bit about how Ayurveda uses these elements and looks at the different tissues. There are seven different tissues in the body, according to Ayurveda, and each one builds on the other. And it's a system that begins with the food that we eat and the breaking down of that substance. And that substance becomes chyle, a liquid-like substance that then becomes really the building block for every other tissue in the body. That plasma in the blood, the lymph fluid, the synovial fluid in the joints, your cerebral spinal fluid, all of that is very much a part of what builds healthy tissue. And being able to, sorry guys, I'm having a little bit of a distraction here with my connection. See if we can get back on there. Yes, excellent. So we build these tissues from rasa. Rasa is that first tissue in the body, and from there it builds and nourishes the blood tissue, which builds and nourishes the muscle, the bones, the fat, the nervous system, and our reproductive fluid. And so if we're not giving ourselves the proper nourishment, or if we're not having a strong digestive capacity to convert that nourishment into fuel, into strong tissue, then we create this buildup of waste that the yogis call ama. And this ama builds up over time in the tissues. It's very thick and sticky and foul smelling, and it clogs up the body. It clogs the channels. And as a result, it decreases that flow of nutrients, of waste product, and of consciousness itself. And when we start to have a depleted prana, a depleted digestive capacity, then this ama really becomes systemic and causes this systemic inflammation. Now, one of the things about autoimmune conditions is that it's so wide ranging and the symptoms are constantly changing. And we've got so many different conditions now that are really, according to Ayurveda, in the end, a result of your immune system not having the building blocks that it needs to recognize itself from a threat or an invader. And then you get this hyperreactivity and sensitivity. So in the brain, you have conditions we see, oops, let me go ahead and change my pen here. Here we go. We've got conditions like autism, diagnoses like multiple sclerosis is another condition that would be under this autoimmune category of the brain. The thyroid, we've got Graves' disease and Hashimoto's, right? Lots of thyroid disorders happening now. In the bones, it tends to manifest as rheumatoid arthritis or as alkalizing spondylosis in the spine. Spondylosis, hopefully I spelled that right. Yeah, these are other conditions that would fall under the bones in terms of a Western perspective. For muscle, we've got muscular dystrophy, we've got fibromyalgia is another one that can come under this category. Blood, we've got lupus and various kinds of cancer like leukemia. The GI tract is where I see a lot of it, right? Celiac disease, irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis is another one that so many clients come into my office with. And the list goes on and on. You know, the skin, we've got psoriasis and eczema. In the lungs, we've got allergies, asthma. For the nerves, a lot of neuropathy, a lot of altered sensation with injuries, numbness and tingling, or sharp shooting, traveling pain. That's a delight, right? I had that after my injury, severe sciatic pain, and using some of these techniques and methods from yoga and Ayurveda, I was able to mitigate that pain. But for those of you with inflammation, not from an injury and from these different kind of branches, if you will, know that no matter what your diagnosis is here, Ayurveda and the yogis are going to look to two specific factors with regard to the body's gross tissues, really in general, but today we're talking about muscles and bones specifically, because that's my jam as a body worker, working with sprains and strains, inflammation systemically or locally, and providing the resources both on the treatment table with various formulas and therapeutic massage, but also in the kitchen, using spices as your superheroes for building tissue, using pranayama and breathing exercises to master that flow of those three forces in the body that either build tissue, break it down, or convert it into something else. These are the three forces at hand. We know them as Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in Ayurveda. Each one has certain properties and function in the body. Vata is the air and space elements that is responsible for all movement in the body. It's very dry and mobile, much like air itself. Pitta dosha is fire and water elements responsible for transformation and metabolism. This helps regulate hormones, your digestion, your elimination. And it is very heating and oily and spreading in nature. And the Kapha dosha is the earth and water elements responsible for cohesion and a building effect of the tissues, also for lubrication, protection, and your immunity itself. And these three forces work at hand in the mind body, and specifically in the muscles and bones, which was what we're talking about today with regard to inflammation. And usually where joints and muscle tissue go out of balance, regardless of which force is responsible for it, it's one of two things. It's either an impaired digestive capacity, Agni, we say, that digestive fire in the gut that cannot convert the nutrients, that cannot burn the impurities that the body naturally stores in our fat cells. This is a digestive capacity that needs to be numero uno in your self-healing endeavor. If you are not eliminating every day, first thing in the morning, then that's something we should look into, and certainly something that is at the basis of the disease process, according to Ayurveda. We do that through using various spices and properties that I'll share with you in a few moments in the kitchen. So knowing that each tissue builds on one another, beginning with that liquid portion of the body, that rasa, which would be considered kapha force in the body. It's that lubrication of the tissues and joints. And if that lubrication goes awry, then we have our second source of chronic inflammation in the joints and muscles, and that's dryness in the body. And different lifestyles will create more dryness in the body. If you're someone who has a lot of movement in your life, if you travel often, or if you are someone who talks a lot in a profession, you're constantly going and going, and thoughts are constantly going and going. Also, if you are just a person whose natural constitution is of the Vata force, or dosha as we call it. And if you want to know what your dominant force or forces are, you can begin by taking a questionnaire on my website, a dosha questionnaire, which will give you a little hint as to what forces might be more dominant for you and where you're more likely to go awry. And that's where working with a practitioner can really help you see clearly and honestly as you self-evaluate and determine which elements and which forces are just naturally stronger in you. We all have all three forces, and some of them more in greater quantities than others. So if you are someone with a very mobile lifestyle, or your diet includes a lot of dry, crunchy, cold foods, then the joints and the tissues will become very dry. And over a course of our lifetime, they naturally dry out. And so if we're trying to slow down that freight train of the tissues drying out by slowing down our schedules, by prioritizing regular meal times, I'll talk more about digestion in the gut tomorrow, but also by getting that really high quality rasa, that high quality first tissue of the body, that liquidity in the body that is the basis for really transporting everything in the tissues, both in and out, right? So I'm going to go head over to my kitchen now, and I'm going to share with you one of my favorite new recipes that is from my friend Kate O'Donnell. It's from her latest book, The Everyday Ayurveda Book of Self-Care. I highly recommend it, and I'll be sure to include the link of where you can order that book in the replay of this. But for now, I'm going to go scooch on over to my kitchen, so bear with me just one moment as I go right on over. Great. So we're now in my kitchen, and what I want to share with you is Kate O'Donnell's Juicy Joint Elixir. This is a great recipe to help lubricate those joints, especially joints that have become very dry due to an imbalance in that air and space element. And so what I've done here is, in a small saucepan, I've put 4 cups of water. Now I'm quadrupling the recipe here because I want to make a bigger batch, have some tonight and some left over for tomorrow. So know if you're making this as a single serving, you'll just split my portions by a quarter or by 4. Okay, I'm quadrupling the recipe. So I've got 4 cups of water here that we're going to heat up. And we're going to heat it up just before it begins to boil. And then we're going to take it off the heat and add turmeric, ground turmeric, and some ground hemp seeds. Now, hemp seeds have wonderful anti-inflammatory properties, and they're especially good at lubricating the joints. It is native to North America. The Native Americans used hemp quite a bit in their lives, and hemp is really a wonderful medicinal plant like so many others, and the seeds are wonderful to use in this elixir. So I'm going to heat that up and just kind of keep chatting with you about how to recognize imbalances and inflammation in the joints for each of the doshas. Now, like I said before, a vata imbalance in the joints is going to show up as coldness. Literally, the joints are cold to the touch. They're stiff. They might be creaking and popping a lot, crackling a lot. You hear crepitus in the knees as we age, and that kind of gristling can be indicative of some wear and tear and some vata imbalance in the joints. Pitta imbalances, on the other hand, tend to manifest inflammation for a pitta individual or pitta imbalance is going to show up more as heat in the joint space. So the joint is very warm to the touch. It's usually accompanied by redness and inflammation, pain as well. The pain is very different from the pain of a vata inflammation, where that pain is usually elicited upon movement. Pitta pain tends to be more systemic and constant. And for kappas and kapha imbalances, inflammation and pain in the joints is going to usually show up with coldness to the joint, swelling and edema, absolutely, and oftentimes a bit of even altered sensation, I might say, because of the swelling. Now, swelling and inflammation is not bad, right? It's part of the body's natural immune response or healing response. Certainly when we have an injury, we want that inflammation to help repair those damaged tissues. But when we have systemic inflammation, like most of us have, because of our exposure to heavy metals, specifically aluminum and mercury in our current environment, then we've really got to take detoxing on the daily. And we've got to be able to slow down our schedules and hydrate those joints to slow down that natural degeneration and drying out. So while that heats up, we're going to add, or prepare rather, I've got my spices here. I talked about hemp seed earlier, and I just bought this 4-ounce packet from Whole Foods In here is about a cup. I'm going to use all of that for my recipe of 4 tonight. We're also going to use a very well-known and revered adaptogenic herb in Ayurveda called ashwagandha, or the Withnia somnifera plant for you botanists. That's the Latin name. And this is known as a particular rejuvenator and builder of muscle and bone tissue while supporting adrenal health, which so many of you are experiencing. And it's a wonderful stamina builder. It's great to support reproductive health, especially for male reproductive health. It also supports healthy hormonal balance for women as well. So it is the root of the winterberry plant, and that is dried and ground up. It's a really wonderful plant. So just keeping an eye on my water here. I don't want it to boil. High temperatures will denature the oil in the hemp seeds. So we just want to make the oil hot, but not boil. I'm going to turn down my heat a little bit to make sure I don't overdo that as I chat away. Here we've got ground turmeric and ginger. Turmeric, most of you know of its anti-inflammation and anti-spasmodic, anti-bleeding properties. It's wonderful for healing wounds and the like, stopping bleeding, really has a myriad of wonderful properties. And the ground ginger is also very healing in that it's warming and circulatory to blast out stagnation of that ama that may have accumulated in the joint space, and also allow for blood purification, for decrease of spasms. Both of these are actually particularly good for sprains, strains, and spasms. And the turmeric, going back to the turmeric also, I want to mention this is especially good in easing menstrual cramps. So these are spices, again, your superheroes in the kitchen. And now that my water is almost boiling, it's really hot here, I'm going to turn that off. And we're going to take that off the heat. And to my 4 cups of water, I'm going to add 1 cup of my hemp seeds. And 2 teaspoons of the ground turmeric. Again, I'm quadrupling, so this will be a half a teaspoon if you were just making it for yourself. And I'm just going to mix this around with a spoon here and allow that to sit and steep for about 5 minutes. So just did a slight mix there to incorporate it all together. And while that sits, I'm going to give you your action challenge for tonight with regard to the joints and the muscles. I want to see your batches of your juicy joint elixir, so make sure to share those with me, email them to me. I'd love to see your variations. Also, I want you to work with what I use a lot of when I have particular inflammation in one area of my body, which is castor oil. A castor oil pack is something that is and has been used in homeopathic medicine for some time. Castor oil has a very pulling property to it. All oil does, but castor oil in particular really pulls inflammation and specifically heat out of the tissues. So if there's a lot of inflammation going on, an injury in one of your joints, a sprained or strained muscle, go ahead and saturate a flannel or cotton cloth with some warmed castor oil. Lay that across that area with a sheet of saran wrap and then a warm compress on top of that. And hang out in that position, allowing that oil to absorb into the tissues for about 30 to 45 minutes. You can remove the saturated cloth, store it in a covered Tupperware in your fridge, and reuse it for up to 25 days. And then keep doing that maybe 3 times a week in the affected area to help manage and cool inflammation of the tissues there. Then with your elixir, you're hydrating that protective liquidity in the joints, in the tissues, and allowing for a much better transit of nutrients, waste, and consciousness and life force itself. So that's your action challenge for tonight. Making the elixir and trying a castor oil pack on a region that might be bothersome to you. Because if we don't handle Ama and Agni, then we have disease, chronic inflammation, and a whole chain and domino effect leading to autoimmune disease and disorder. And it's optional, folks. Autoimmune disease is not a lifelong sentence. You can heal yourself using natural methods and using Western medicine where you need to. There's room for both. And I'll talk more about that tomorrow, where I'm going to talk about why you should never mix fruit with your yogurt and why you might have to break up with your smoothies, guys. Sorry to break it to you, but I'm going to be talking about the gut and inflammation in the gut and what to do instead. So I'll see you then. Namaste. Wait, I can't leave yet. I didn't finish showing you the recipe. Sorry, guys. Wait, I can't leave you yet. I haven't shown you the rest of how to make the elixir. Sorry, guys. My first run at this setup, so I'm still getting with the program here. So now that that's been steeping, I have the turmeric and the hemp seeds in that hot water. It's been sitting there for about 5 minutes. You're going to go ahead from here and add the rest of your ingredients. So I'm going to add 4 teaspoons of ginger. Again, I'm quadrupling. I tend to also use some very generous measures here. And then I'm going to add my ashwagandha. And ashwagandha is pretty heavy-handed here. You're going to use, or I'm going to use 8 teaspoons for my 4 servings. If you're making one just for yourself, just use 2. Again, this is a really revered adaptogenic herb. It'll give you what you need. It won't be too stimulating, nor will it be sedating. And just to finish this, I'm going to add just a few dashes of Himalayan pink salt, a wonderful mineral that the muscles need. And then I'm also going to add some freshly cracked black pepper to add some heat, to stoke that Agni, to bust up any ama that's in the joints. And then I'm going to use a hand blender to combine all of this together into a nice frothy drink. Just going to scoop some of the seeds. Seem to be all at the bottom here.
And I'll mute this so that you don't have to endure. Cheers, everybody. Woo! Nice and spicy. Of course, you can modify with the black pepper and the ginger, but this is a really nice medicinal blend that will lubricate those joints. So enjoy and get to your castor oil packs. Tomorrow, I'll tell you how to avoid a bad smoothie and support your gut.